originally came to from New Brunswick, and I knew Joan because of the language issues that she's fighting and battling in New Brunswick. And it was through me that she found out about the Ontario landowners and thought that it was so important, the private property rights were so important, that she would like to start a landowner group in New Brunswick. So she came up to Ottawa to see what the landowners was all about, and she met Len Harris, and I am so pleased to say that a year later, they're an item, and I believe I heard engagement was somewhere, wedding is in the future, no? I heard that last weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the great pleasure of introducing to you former Senator, Independent Senator of Queensland, Australia, Mr. Len Harris.
I deny everything emphatically. Is it on? Yes, it is. Yep. I just deny all of that emphatically. Except for the bit about her being the chauffeur. So, good afternoon. For those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Len Harris. I'm what we call a hysterical miner from North Queensland, i.e. historical. I have a very small, at the moment, inoperative gold mine, and if I were to stay home a little bit, we'd probably get it operating. So, welcome to CARS. I did a 6-year term in the Senate, Federal Senate in Australia. Our Senate is different only in the respect that senators in Australia are elected. So they obviously didn't want me there real bad. They have a procedure where your Liberals and our Conservatives just cross-reference each other and makes it impossible for any independent people to get elected. But it was a wonderful opportunity and a great privilege for those 6 years to represent my state. Well, I have always been more than moderately interested in politics, have a real, what I would say, bent for legislation. So as well as the Francophone immigration policy that New Brunswick has brought in, I just want to spend a little bit of time this afternoon talking about a couple of other things. I don't put hierarchies on anything. I think all of the information is absolutely essential that we get it out. So I'm going to do a little bit on legislation so you have a better understanding. I'm going to talk about the latest, I'll say, the arm of the octopus, and the octopus is the United Nations. Has anyone heard of an organisation other than those who've been to other meetings, ever heard of an organisation called ICLEI? I-C-L-E-I. One lady here. Two. Don't be sort of disappointed that you weren't aware of it. It's buried so effectively, the United Nations, and I noticed somebody has a write-up there on Maurice Strong. He's a gentleman, unfortunately, he's a Canadian, and he's the gentleman who's been driving the environmental policy in the United Nations since about 1992. And it's a bit of a misnomer, because before that, his income was totally derived by service utilities here in Canada. So on one hand, he's taking the money in to live on, and in the other hand, he's actually deposing anything that relates to the standard of living that we have today. So I'll speak a little bit about Hickley and then move on to the Francophone immigration policy. The only thing I haven't done is worked out how to get this remote. So just, can everybody hear me quite clearly? Yep, good. The laptop's in the way. So, as I said, we're going to speak about understanding legislation, Canada's constitution, regulations, and I'll speak very briefly at the end in relation to the remedy. So just letting our friend here know that I'll provide him with a copy of the PowerPoint. Yeah. Now, to understand the law, I'll just see if I can get that a little bit clearer. Now that's as clear as we can get. So our law is made up of basically three separate parts. First of all, it's made up of common law. Secondly is statute law. And the third one is public law, which is a combination of all of them. Now common law comes to us from right back in 1066, when the Normans invaded England, and for quite a few years there, English was not spoken, either in the Parliament or in the King's Court. It was French. So the Normandy part of France, the two islands, Guernsey and Jersey, and England were all considered as one country. And it was through basically the lord of the manor sitting in the little village common squares and deliberating on issues between people that is the start of our common law. In latter years, it's also made up from what we call precedents, and they are the judgments that the courts make. And one of the reasons why that is quite important is that that gives us some form of consistency in the application of what we call statute law. Statute law starts in each parliament, whether it's federal, provincial, as a bill. It passes through the committee stages and eventually comes up before, in your case here, the Lieutenant Governor, who then should assess that as to its benefit for Ontario, or if it is detrimental to it. obviously royal assent in the case of it being beneficial, but he should refuse to give royal assent, not only to a bill that he believes is not, or he or she, that is not in the interests of the people in Ontario, through the instructions that accompany his letters patent, which is his contract between himself and the sovereign, that carries a set of instructions how he or she is to carry out the office. And one of those instructions is that they are, the wording is stopped. It means they cannot proceed and give royal assent to any bill that diminishes the rights of the Crown. And that is the section that I've been suggesting to Tom Black and the members of OLA, that they have a very, very strong position in relation to the OSPCA legislation, because in that legislation the Parliament has actually given powers to a non-government organisation. And I'll just speak very, very quickly. For a bill to have powers that are administrable, the person administering them must be under the Crown. Now, I don't know whether you have the situation here in Canada. We certainly do in Australia. That if a police officer has not got his cap on with the insignia of the Crown on that cap, he cannot even stop you or arrest you. He must be under the Crown, because he's actually administering one of the rights of the Crown, and that is to deprive you of your liberty. So personally, I cannot see how a government can hand that type of power to a non-government organisation. But it's a bit like what we call a Demtel ad in Australia. There's always more. In the OSPCA legislation, it states that the organisation itself can make regulations and enforce them to actually achieve the objects of the association. Now, I don't know why we're getting that feedback. So there's two instances why I believe that legislation is challengeable by the Constitution, in that the Lieutenant Governor exceeded his authority in actually giving royal assent to that legislation. So this is why it's so important to have some understanding of legislation. For an act to be able to be enforced, it must very clearly and succinctly set out the power that it is actually bringing into instance. So again, that goes against the ability of the legislation to actually appoint a non-government body to be able to make their own regulations and enforce them on private property. So, as well as that, it also has to very clearly set out the jurisdiction where that power can actually be administered. The OSPCA Act speaks nothing whatsoever about private property or letters patent, because you hold your land through your letters patent in the form of fee simple. So it does not define where the powers can be administered. It doesn't define, it does define who can administer them. This is this non-government entity. And again, the Lieutenant Governor, when he or she is perusing this bill, because at this stage it's still a bill, he or she must take those things into, or well, they should take those sort of things into consideration. The problem that we have is that it's not the Lieutenant Governor writing the regulations. Nobody expects that. But it is the unelected bureaucrats who are writing the legislation with, I believe, in a large sense, their socialist intention. And the Lieutenant Governor, sadly, just becomes a rubber stamp, does as he or she are told. Also, as we're going, if you've got a question, just put your hand up. I'll try and answer them quickly so that we sort of don't run too long. The other night I did this and the meeting took 2.5 hours. There were that many questions.